Welcome back to another episode of Transitions from War. I'm your host, Mike Ergo, a Marine Corps veteran. I've returned from Iraq and faced the challenges of PTSD, addiction, and grief to create a new life that is balanced and healthy in mind, body, and spirit. I'm joined by fellow Marine Rich Straley, and together we talk about our journey to mental and physical health through endurance sports. Each episode will share some of our journey or interview inspired veterans and subject matter experts to help us find that purpose and connection we all crave. If you have any questions, comments, or topic ideas, feel free to email me at mike@transitionsformore.com. And if you enjoy the show, consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your audio. As always, thanks for listening, everyone, and let's get to the show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Transitions from War. I'm your host, Mike, and today we have an awesome guest, Dr. Edmund Farrer, and he's got an app called Auto, which I've used and paired with the New Hera IQ Buds. And we've really, we talked a few times about this, but for everybody like myself who has that fun ringing in the ears problem, we call in the States tinnitus or tinnitus, elsewhere in the UK, it's something that can, just obviously drive you crazy. It's bothered me quite a bit since I got back from Iraq. And the good news is it's not a death sentence. It's not a life sentence, as I've learned. And we're gonna get a little get into the weeds, perhaps, talking about all this. But without all that being out of the way, Ed, welcome to the show, and thanks for being here, man.
Thank you very much for having me, Mike. And I want to start by saying thank you for all the great work that you do, not just for veterans, but raising awareness of tinnitus as well. I've been a follower of your show for some time now, and I think you do some really great work. So I'm really appreciative of that. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Anyone these days can have a show. So podcasting has really taken up in the last couple of years. But what I realize is that, we have the info. We can get the info from medical experts. We can get info from, experts in the field and certain things. And what's really interesting is hearing from people who actually, like us, who suffer from it too, and who've dealt with it, and the experience of what it's like to have that problem not be so detrimental. So, I appreciate your position too. And you're a veteran of the Royal Air Force, am I correct?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, we know it's like from a couple sides of the coin here. So,
yeah, and I certainly have I really agree. I think I do have an interesting perspective, because I've had tinnitus myself. Thankfully for me, it's been quite mild. I got used to it quite quickly.
Yeah.
But I still have that understanding of, the unpleasantness and the irritation and the potential impact it can have on your life. But I've also seen it from the other side of the coin as well. For my time, both as a doctor and also in the military, seeing patients. I had patients with tinnitus as well. So I certainly do think it provides an interesting angle, and something like tinnitus that's so common in the military and in veterans. I'm looking forward to discussing it with you, man. It's a really, really big topic, and I think it's something that needs a lot more awareness for it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when I've described it to people, there's usually a couple of perspectives people will take on it. One is that they might think it's, like an overwhelming ringing of the ears, like so badly to where you can't hear anything else, perhaps, and they kind of catastrophize it. And luckily for me, it's not that way. And then the other perspective I hear probably more commonly is like, okay, you hear a little ringing. What's the big deal? I mean, it can't be that much of a bother. But I think what I've noticed is that if you have anything else going on, it kind of, it's perpetually it exacerbates whatever you got going on, which makes a tinnitus perhaps, like ring a little louder, or at least we perceive it to be ringing louder, which exacerbates, anger, irritability, PTSD symptoms, everything else like that. Is that something you notice too?
100%. When I first noticed my tinnitus, I was actually going through quite a stressful time in my life, and I was working as a doctor, and I was doing quite long hours. I wanted to do surgical training. I wanted to become a surgeon, and you know, as you can imagine, lots of stuff that comes along with that, and it's quite a lot to do.
God, yeah.
You know, this tinnitus suddenly sort of came upon me, and it drove me mad to begin with. But as soon as I realized that if I could get my stress levels under control, you know, I've always been quite good at dealing with stress, actually. Work related stress anyway. And if I could get my stress levels under control, then I could actually improve the perception of my tinnitus as well. And that's actually, from a medical perspective, you know, that makes sense, of course, because the reason why tinnitus is so bad for so many people isn't because of the sound itself. It's actually the reaction, your brain's reaction to the sounds, that causes it to be unpleasant. So, you know, if you actually think, what is tinnitus? Well, it's your brain just perceiving a sound. Is that sound going to kill you? No. Is the sound causing you pain? No. Is it a symptom of something that's going to, you know, is there something dangerous going on there? No. Is it giving you a threat? No. It's not actually anything objectively wrong. It's just a very, very annoying sound. And you know, the reason why tinnitus is so unpleasant is because the brain reacts negatively to the ringing sound or the brushing sound or the whistling sound or whatever you hear, and that negative reaction makes you feel very, very, it makes you feel unpleasant. You know, it's really not very nice. Yeah, it makes you scared, gives you anxiety, stops you from sleeping, stops you from concentrating. And if you can, like, and if you can learn how to interrupt that sort of that cycle of the negative reaction that your brain gets when it notices the tinnitus, then that's how you can actually start to manage it. But certainly, like, stress and tinnitus are very, very closely linked. And, you know, if you hear your tinnitus, makes you stressed. Being stressed makes your tinnitus louder.
Yeah.
Tinnitus getting louder makes you more stressed, and it's like a vicious cycle. And and you know, interrupting that cycle is you know, the best way to manage it in the early stages.
That makes sense. And, you know, it what gave me a lot of hope after talking with you and you know, trying out auto was just the fact that when I realized, okay, there are people with chronic pain, you know, pain actually causing them distress. And the ways people manage chronic pain are, you know, of finding ways not to catastrophize it. You know, for example, it's like, for our listeners, you know, like if I'm having, like, if I stub my toe and it's just bothering me, you know, the thought creeps up, man, I can't deal with this now. How am I going to deal with this in half an hour? How am I going to deal with this in an hour? There's no way. And then it gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
And you learn ways to manage that and say, like, okay, well, let's just take a step back here and notice what else is going on in the world. You know, am I okay? Is my heart beating, et cetera, et cetera. So people with chronic pain can do that. You know, surely we can do something like that.
Chronic pain is actually very, very similar to tinnitus in many ways. And I've spoken to actually many soldiers who had, when I was in the Air Force, I spoke to many soldiers that had issues with chronic pain from, you know, injuries. You know, they'd been blown up in Afghanistan or Iraq, or, you know, that injuries not related to serving, but that, you know, they'd been injured in playing sports or something like that. But you know, it's similar to tinnitus in that when you first start to experience this pain, when you first start to hear the tinnitus, you think, Jesus, like, how can I cope with this?
Yeah,
I can't even cope with it for the day, like, let alone the week or the rest of the month or the rest of my life. I can't cope with it. And that feeling of, like, dread and anxiety that these symptoms, either the tinnitus or the pain, causes you, I think are actually very similar. And that's one of the things that I've spoken to hundreds of people with tinnitus now. One of the first things they say, one of the biggest impacts that it has, especially in the early stages, is that feeling of anxiety and not being able to cope, not being able to manage something in the long term. But you know, when you actually realize that it is in fact possible to manage, as it would with chronic pain, it's not easy, but it's certainly possible, and it's certainly doable with the right mindset. it's entirely possible to go back to the point where your tinnitus actually isn't bothering you, and it isn't causing those feelings of dread and anxiety in the long term. But yeah, very, very similar. Like, there's actually many conditions that affect you in a similar way to that are incurable. We can't get rid of. We can manage them, but we can't get rid of them. And tinnitus is one of the bigger ones.
Yeah, and off the bat, like when I hear somebody say we can just manage it, at first it sounded kind of like defeatist, like, well, we can manage it. It's like, but somehow I think not really seeking out to alleviate tinnitus, but just alleviate, other stressors in my life. I think I learned how to deal with it. So, pretty well, using like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is part of auto. And just the other stressors, seem to come down, in tandem, to the point where, it doesn't really bother me. The only time I personally notice it is if I'm getting, stressed, say, someone I don't particularly enjoy will show up and, maybe I don't enjoy their commentary. I will start noticing a ringing in the ears. And then I'll say like, oh, I think I'm getting stressed, so it's a little like, it's a cue.
Yeah. But that, like, that's why I can tell you are doing a good job of, you have done, and you have taught yourself how to manage it, because the recognition of, I'm getting stressed now, my tinnitus is getting louder and it's stressing me out.
Yeah.
That recognition is something that actually in the early stages, you don't have insight into. You just get stressed and you don't kind of link it to the fact that the tinnitus is causing the stress and you're getting stressed. But the first step to actually managing that is recognizing, hang on, like this is making me feel really bad, and noting that. And like thinking, okay, well, now I've recognized that that's happening. There's actually things I can do to prevent it from getting worse and prevent myself from feeling worse, like a breathing exercise, a cognitive exercise, going to do some exercise, listening to some music, lots of different things that you can do to interrupt. But just going back to what you said as well earlier about I've actually lost my train of thought.
We were talking about chronic pain. We were talking about managing, symptoms. We were talking about just the ability to step back and maybe from an outside perspective on ourselves, realize, oh, the body's getting stressed, the mind is getting stressed, and then what can I do?
Yeah, and that's it. That's the key is not knowing what you can do. I remember now. So it's we talked about managing tinnitus and that maybe seeming a bit defeatist, and absolutely, like, I think 95% of people with tinnitus that I've spoken to have been told by their doctor something along the lines of, sorry, there's nothing that can be done.
Right.
Or sorry, you just need to learn to live with it. And like, I'm sure you probably had a similar experience yourself, Mike. Like, how horrible does that feel? Like, how like terrifying is that? Like, you've been to the doctor, the person that you think is going to be able to provide a solution for you, and they've just said, like, sorry, I can't do anything else for you. Basically, there's, sorry, it's tough. You just
I'll tell you exactly what happened. They said that, and my tinnitus like went through the roof, and that's all I could hear.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. And the other interesting thing as well is, I've actually been on the other side of the table. I've actually been the doctor saying, and if only I knew like how damaging it was, but I've been the doctor saying to the patient, like, not just for tinnitus, but other things as well, like, I'm kind of at the limit here of what I can do. So sorry, it's yours to manage now. And that is it's not only actually incorrect, because there are lots of things that you can do. It's also hugely mentally tough to hear that, especially if you've only had tinnitus for a short period of time, to hear that, the doctor, the person that's meant to be able to solve this problem for you, in fact, can't solve it, and you need to do it on your own. That's very isolating and very terrifying for people to hear. From the perspective of the doctor, I don't want to blame. I don't think it's actually the certainly here in the UK, I don't think it's the doctor's fault. When I was at medical school, we spent like maybe an hour learning about tinnitus in 5 years.
Right.
And we didn't learn about tinnitus in terms of how do you manage it. We learned about it in terms of, well, it could be a symptom of, hearing loss, earwax, an infection, a brain tumor, something like that. And I've got lots of friends that are doctors, and unfortunately, I don't know why this is, but the education just isn't there for them, unless, of course, you specialize in ENT. I think tinnitus needs more awareness. Doctors need better training to manage tinnitus for something that is literally so common. Well,
it seems like it's doable, because the way I'm seeing it is that, okay, if I'm a medical student, I'm looking at all kinds of things that could harm me or harm a patient, potentially kill them. And, ringing in the ears just doesn't sound that terrible in comparison. So maybe we only spend an hour doing that. But you're right. It's like, I remember coming to a doctor and saying, like, this is what's going on. I've heard of it before. And then kind of getting the shrug and like, I don't know. Like, I mean, you deal with it. It felt like I was carrying this heavy weight, and they're like, all right, finally, can you help me with this? And they're like, sorry, man, I keep carrying it. And I was just like exhausted. But I mean, it's great news that like there are things we can do.
Of course there are. And it, when I'm speaking to people that are struggling with tinnitus, I say to them, and I'm sure many of your listeners as well will be experiencing difficulties in their lives, whether it's tinnitus or something else. But specifically with tinnitus, there is help available. There is things you can do. And, I can say with almost 100% certainty, it is entirely possible to live a normal life, even with loud tinnitus. And Mike, you're a great example of that, because you're someone that's struggled with tinnitus, but then has learned, not overnight, but has learned how to, and got the help when it's needed, and has learned how to live with it and how to manage it yourself. The language I'm using, live with it and manage it, is probably not the right language, actually. On reflection, it's entirely possible to just live not being bothered by it, living with it, but stopping to be bothered, like actually just thinking, like, if you hear your tinnitus, that's so what, like, that's my tinnitus, it's not going to hurt me. It's impossible to live a life unintruded by tinnitus, no matter how severe that tinnitus is. And I've spoken to so many people, yourself included, that have got on top of it and have gone back to how things were before they had tinnitus.
Yeah, and so that's a good segue into like what we can do about it. And you developed and came up with the app Auto, and I'm excited to learn a little more about how that came to be, and for our listeners too, what exactly it involves. Because I think originally when I heard about it, like, I just had these dumb fantasies, like almost like a Neo in the Matrix. There's some like knowledge gets passed to him through that tube in the back of his head, and he's like, "Oh, I know how to deal with this. I know kung fu."
Man, I wish we could do that. Maybe in a few years. So the idea came about because my co-founder is a doctor in the Navy, and I was a doctor in the Air Force, and we both actually have tinnitus ourselves. George slightly worse than mine. We realised it was a problem during our time in the military, speaking to men and women with severe tinnitus, and we thought, the help that these people are getting just isn't good enough. They were waiting like sometimes over a year for treatment on the NHS, or they were having to pay a lot of money for it. So we thought, let's take the best available treatment, digitalize it, put it into a mobile app, and build something that is accessible to, have a vision for building something that is accessible to anyone on earth. Once we've translated it, of course. So, English speaking countries to begin with. So we built this app. Now, the way the app works is using something called cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which you've mentioned, Mike. So we know there's no cure for tinnitus, but we do know that it's possible to live a normal life with tinnitus. How is that possible? It's possible using something called habituation. Habituation is the point where you stop noticing your tinnitus. It no longer bothers you. If you do notice it, it doesn't cause that stress response that you would experience when you first had tinnitus. So if you imagine being on a long car journey or a long flight, first 10, 15 minutes of that flight or car journey, you'll hear the engines, the aircraft engines. you'll hear the tires on the road, you'll hear the wind going past the car. It's not a pleasant sound, it's pretty loud, but like after 10-15 minutes, your brain just tunes it out because it stops perceiving it as a threat. And that change in perception means that it's no longer unpleasant, and you can even sleep, so in a long flight you can sleep even though the engines are loud. You can still sleep because your brain has stopped perceiving that sound as a threat. That's exactly what happens with tinnitus, and that process is called habituation. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is the fastest way to get to habituation.
I get it.
And so the way the app works is by teaching you these techniques used in CBT through recorded audio sessions. So if your listeners may be aware of Headspace or Calm, apps that teach you to meditate. Otto teaches you to habituate using recorded audio sessions. So you literally 10-15 minutes a day, plug your headphones in, and you'll have a recorded voice taking you through a session that teaches you these skills and techniques. And we've had a really positive response from both users and professionals alike, actually, so far. We launched around 18 months ago, and it's been a really, really, really positive response.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we can habituate to a lot of things, and I think if you talk to any veteran or active duty military personnel, I mean, the idea of getting yelled at by a drill sergeant, drill instructor, is terrifying for most people at first. And while you might not fully habituate to that during your time in basic training, at least the threat level drops quite a bit, because you're like, oh, this person isn't about to murder me, right now. And so if we can habituate to something like that, I mean,
and another example, mate, like think how much if you're think of the times when you were trying to, you were so tired and you needed to get some sleep, when you were in basic training, when you were deployed, whatever. And I can guarantee you, like a lot of those times there would have been so much noise and stuff going on around you, but you were still able to sleep. Your brain just didn't perceive that as a threat, because you were tired, and you could still sleep even though there was lots of stuff going on around you. Mainly because you're literally so exhausted, and you can, but still, there's a lot of noise and stuff going on around you, and your brain doesn't perceive that as a threat, and because you're just used to it, your brain habituates to it.
That makes sense. And I think endurance athletes, also learn how to do this. I've always, well, not always, but I've had the fortune of, training with someone who helped me realize that, okay, my legs are tired and they're starting to hurt. And the ability to just focus on other parts of my body, so my brain doesn't need to perceive that as a stress, like my legs are about to break. Is that habituation as well, or is that a different?
I certainly think it's you, and I think what you're talking about is your you've become practiced in not recognizing the pain in your legs. After you've you're on the last 10 miles of your Ironman or whatever, and your legs are in absolute agony, and you feel like I can't possibly go on, but you focus on something else. And I can't speak from experience, by the way. I've never. My co-founder George has done an Ironman, but I've never done an Ironman. But I think it's certainly a similar concept. I think when it comes to tinnitus, it's more of a long-term thing, because in 10 miles time, the pain is going to be over, and you can
right.
The next 10 minutes, you can get if you get through the next 10 miles, you can get there. But I think there's certainly there is definitely similarities. There's definitely similarities. Yeah.
Well, I think the nice thing is that drawing on the experience of our listeners, of things they've done, things they've accomplished. They're in the military or outside, is the idea that we can learn to live a happy, productive, successful life with tinnitus not being a factor in it is just it is great. And trying on the experience from people, it's like, this is very doable. It's not the hardest thing in the world. It really is.
Yeah, if you think of Mike, if you think of some of the some of the amazing achievements that you've got, And I'm sure many of your listeners will have done similarly arduous challenges or similarly difficult things or gone through difficult periods of their life. Tinnitus habituation is hard at times and really tough mentally. But if you can if you can go through basic training.
Yeah, exactly.
That's like, it's not the hardest thing in the world. Like lots of people can do it, but it's still tough. You can habituate your tinnitus. There's lots of things that are a lot harder. Let's put it that way.
And so my assumption or my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, is that through habituation, at first it is something that we are actively thinking about and actively using parts of our brain that, burns a lot of calories. But eventually it's something that's second nature, where we don't have to actively think through every step. Okay, this is tinnitus. I don't need to worry about it. Focus on something else, et cetera, et cetera. It's something that we just do. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're right, Mike. So the early stages, it's difficult, because if I say to you, like, don't think about chocolate, you'll think of chocolate.
Right.
Especially if you've got like a ringing noise in your ear. So, so the actual aim is like not to try to stop thinking about it, because if you just think, I need to stop thinking about my tinnitus, that's not going to happen.
Drive yourself mad.
Exactly. Yeah. Because you'll just think about your tinnitus all the time. So, but you're right in that the early stages, it takes more effort in training your brain and practicing the skills you need. One of the exercises is breathing. Like, if your tinnitus is bad and making you feel anxious, one of the first things we'll teach you to do in the app is how to breathe. If you can control your breathing and slow your breathing down, such a simple thing, and people think there's no way that's going to help, but it does. Like, if you can slow your breathing down and control your breathing and breathe in a really controlled in a slow way, it's actually going to make you feel better. And it's probably going to reduce the perception of your tinnitus, just focusing on your breath. But you have to do it a lot. And you can't just sort of do it once and think, oh, that's it, that's the benefit. You have to practice these. You have to practice these things. If you're training, if you're like training for doing physical training, it's repetition. Instead of training your body to do something, you're training your brain. You're training your brain to do something. As with so many things.
Yeah, no, I like that. I'm laughing to myself because, as my job, working with veterans and speaking to them and working in mental health, it's I can describe my job as, I sit down and talk with people, and I guess giving away a trade secret is a lot of times what I'm doing is helping people take a breath.
Yeah.
If I'm boiling it down, I'm really helping people like slow down and take a breath.
Yeah. You're right, because I'm sure people you don't realize when you're doing it, but if you're feeling anxious or nervous or stressed or whatever, you start breathing faster, and that's like just part of the stress response, and interrupting that like cycle. And I'm sure you do this with the people that the people that you speak to, but just like, stop, take a breath, slow your breathing down. And it's one of the first things actually we teach people how to do in the app, is just to breathe. And it works wonders. Many of your listeners will probably be thinking, like, I just don't believe him. Like, there's no way that like just breathing slowly can help. Trust me, like, try it for a few weeks. And if it doesn't help, it hasn't helped, then send me an email, and I'll say I was wrong. But in so many people, it's really helpful.
Yeah, and I think the majority of people listening to this who suffer from tinnitus will be like, all right, I'm ready to try something. And what's nice is that we're not talking about some weird thing of like looking at crystals and
This stuff is proven.
Yeah.
Actually, one thing I should mention as well: the CBT overall is proven to be effective. It's proven by scientific research to be effective. But breathing, like something as simple as breathing as well, has also been proven to work. I think, I don't know if this is real or not, but I actually saw that the Navy SEALs do something called box breathing.
Yes,
if they're about to do something, if they're about to like literally do something that's going to be very, very difficult, and they need to perform, they'll do something called box breathing, where they breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, and hold it for 4 seconds. And it's something that's actually taught in the Navy SEALs. So it works.
Right. And if it works for those guys, I'd
Yeah.
say it's at least worth looking into for the rest of us, huh?
Yeah. These guys are literally performing at like their top level.
Yeah.
In terms of mental performance, physical performance, like they need to really be at the top of their game. So if that's what those guys are doing, then I think we can learn something from that.
I agree. So like as far as getting auto, it's an app, at least for me, using Apple products, an app in the App Store, download it, sign up for it, and you can begin right away. Is it something you need headphones for, or can you listen to it without?
Yeah, you can listen to it without headphones. It's personal preference, really. If you're listening to it at night and you sleep next to someone, probably headphones might be better.
Yeah.
But like it really is personal preference. It just depends on what works best for you. So yeah, you can just literally search Otto. It's spelled OTO. It's available on the App Store and the Google Play Store as well, Apple and Android. You can try it for free for 7 days. Without paying anything. If you want, I know you have a lot of veterans listening. So if there is any, we have a deal in the UK actually where we're working with a veterans charity, so they pay for it. But if there's any veterans listening in the US that would like to for an extended trial, just download the app, send us a message in the app and just say, I heard about you guys on Mike's podcast. Can you give me an extended trial and we can unlock it for an extended period of time?
That is humongous. Like I'm blown away. I'm really by the offer of that, Ed. And I think about where I was, years ago, with this just being such a problem that would exacerbate other stuff going on in my life. And it was just, like you said, a vicious cycle. And the ability to get out of that loop. I mean, it's priceless. So the fact that you'd offer that is humongous. So thank you.
Well, no, it's it's something that's very close to my heart. So, it's good to be able to. When I was a doctor, it was like I found it rewarding. I did find it rewarding, helping people on an individual level, but to be able to do something to help potentially a large number of people with a product is very rewarding. So yeah, but no, if anyone does want to talk as well, if anyone wants to, talk about their experience with tinnitus, we're always looking to speak to people with tinnitus who've got lived experience with tinnitus, and veterans in particular. I've spoken to so many I haven't actually spoken to many US veterans, but I've spoken to lots here in the UK. If anyone's interested in speaking, we can always learn from your experiences to make the app better for future users. So if anyone's interested in speaking to me or a member of the team, please do reach out.
Yeah. What's the best way for us to reach out to you? And
yeah, just ping me an email. So it's ed@joinotto.com, joinoto.com.
That's pretty simple. Yeah, that's pretty simple email address to jot down. So everyone, we'll have that down in the show notes. So please take a look. And, if you have doubts, good, try it. If you're suffering from tinnitus and it's, driving you crazy, good, try it. Try Auto. No, I have nothing but good things to say about it and the work you're doing, Ed. So I thank you for that and for taking your time on the show. And yeah, I mean, we leave anything out? We miss anything?
I think that's a pretty good whistle stop tour of tinnitus, I think, and how to manage it.
Yeah.
No, thanks so much for inviting me on, Mike, and having me, and thank you for your support for support with what you're doing. For those of you not aware, Mike's sort of been with a supporter of Otto for a long time now. So really appreciate it and glad that we were able to help. And yeah, it's been great to be on the show.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I know we're gonna be talking more on other avenues about Otto, and so I look forward to that. And I just thank you for being part of the show today. Yeah.
Great to be on. Thanks so much, man.
All right, everyone, that'll do it for this week of Transitions for More. Go ahead and subscribe to the show, follow it. Find us on Facebook, Instagram. You can email me, Mike@transitionsformore.com with any questions or ideas for the show. And Please send the show to people you know who might need to listen to it. Leave us a rating and review on iTunes if you get a chance. And just thanks for listening. All right, everyone. See you next week. Bye-bye.